Thank you for joining First Draft's Reporting on Coronavirus webinar series. First Draft's mission is to empower societies with accurate information in critical moments. We help reporters around the world to produce credible coverage. I would like to introduce to you today Laura Garcia from First Draft. Hi, Laura, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon session on how to use Facebook Ad Library. I'm going to introduce my colleague Maddy in a second, but first I want to tell you a little bit more about who we are at First Draft and what it is that we do. It is amazing to see everybody introducing themselves in the chat, and we have people from all over across the Atlantic over here in Europe, from the US, watching us from Singapore. So everybody is incredibly welcome to this afternoon's session. Maddy, if you can go through to the next slide. So at First Draft, we're a nonprofit that works with journalists and newsrooms all over the world to research, understand, and come up with collaborative ways to fight disinformation and ask questions together of how do we report this stuff? How do we find it? How do we monitor it? And the most important thing is to do that in a collaborative way. And to face the challenges of reporting in an age of coronavirus, which is granted very new, but probably going to stay with us for a little while, we have produced 2 online free courses, in case you guys didn't already know. The first one is aimed at journalists. It's called Covering Coronavirus, an online course for journalists. It has about 3 or 4 hours worth of content that is built in a kind of modular way, so you don't have to do it from beginning to end. You can dip in and out to the things that interest you or where you think you need to practice your skills a little bit more. And then the second one is aimed at the public, your mom, your friends, your family, the people that are around you, to help us all navigate through the infodemic together. You can find both of them at the URL covid.firstdraftnews.org. You need to make an account, but that's just like a login, and it's completely free there for you guys to share and to use. And if we can go to the next slide, Maddy. So my role at First Draft is as the training and support manager. I also do a bunch of these sessions in Spanish. So if anyone's joining us from a Spanish-speaking country, just have a look at our resources in Spanish as well. And I'd love to introduce Maddy Webb, who is an investigative reporter with First Draft. She has been completely immersing herself in not just political ad data and things in the run-up to the American election, but also to how different states in the US are responding to the coronavirus crisis, looking at different social media, constantly monitoring for different issues. And she is going to give us a thorough walkthrough of the kind of work that she does on Facebook Ad Library today. And I'm actually really excited because it's not my normal day of my normal place of inhabiting journalism, and I'm very excited to learn a bunch of stuff from Maddy today. And just to remind you guys, in the next slide, we've got the 3 things, hopefully, that out of today we're all going to learn together, and I'll hand it over to Maddy to take us through it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Laura. And I guess it's probably worth saying that, Laura, I believe you're going to be translating this into Spanish after this is over. So if there's any Spanish speakers on here that would prefer to hear it in that language, that'll be up at some point shortly.
Yeah, so watch today to practice your English, and then stay tuned for when we're going to run the session in Spanish.
Definitely. Okay, so the goals of today's webinar is to learn the basics of searching the Facebook ad library. So the bulk of this, the first half of this presentation, is going to be taking you through how to search efficiently, what all the different tips and tricks for how you can sort and navigate the webinar are. Then we're going to talk about how to understand and understanding how to access and interpret available data about the ads. So there's a couple of things you can download, and data can be a little intimidating sometimes, but with just a couple simple data tricks, you can get some really interesting information out of what's available on the ads library. And then goal 3, sort of sprinkled throughout those 2 sections, we're going to be considering how this can be used to aid reporting. And also, you know, if you're not from a reporting background, if you're coming here from NGOs or you know, something in the political realm, and you're interested in just monitoring your issue and how it's being paid for and presented on Facebook, absolutely feel free to ask questions about how we can help you with that too.
Just a little reminder while you change slides, Maddy, if anyone's got any questions, I'm going to be monitoring the chat box, and the questions will go directly to panelists. So if at any point you have a query, type it in there, and I will make sure to put them to Maddy when we've got little breaks built between the session.
Yes, definitely feel free to reach out. That'll make my job easier, so please do. Okay, so the Facebook ad library. I often accidentally call it the Facebook ads archive, so you might hear it referred to it that way sometimes. They mean the same thing. Those are not two different tools. If somebody's talking about the ads archive, now you'll know what they're talking about. So we're gonna start with a little poll. So, question presented to you. If I don't use social media, I won't be impacted by Facebook ads. Do you think that's true or false?
So you should be able to see it on your screen now, guys. If just click whichever answer, they're anonymized. We're not going to know who clicked on what answer. Don't worry about that. It just helps us gauge a little bit of what we all together already know. So if you don't use social media, you won't be impacted by Facebook ads. True or false? 80% of people have voted. Come on, we can get that all the way to 100.
We have a contrarian.
Well, it's still pretty stark, kind of like where we're all leaning towards. We're all leaning towards the fact that this is false. Maddy, are we correct?
You are. You guys did not fall for my not so trick question. So good for everybody, except again, our one contrarian, which I appreciate going against the grain. Okay. Yeah, so the first thing to know about the Facebook ads archive is that it houses ads library, excuse me. It houses more than just Facebook ads. So Facebook has purchased Instagram. So all ads that are shown on the Instagram platform are also found in the ads archive library. Anything that's shown on Messenger, which is what has replaced the Facebook DM system, and it is technically a separate app, so they delineate those ads differently, also shows up on the Facebook ad library. And then really importantly, Facebook has something called the Facebook Audience Network, or sometimes referred to as FAN. That is a term for all of the external sites that have partnered with Facebook to feed Facebook ads into their landing pages and viewable content. So things like Shazam, Huffington Post, the Kardashian games, both Kim and Kylie's, house Facebook ads. So if you're curious about what those viewers might be seeing, you can find that here. So yeah, absolutely. You know, my dad really prides himself on being a social media avoidant, but that does not mean that he is not exposed to the ads that you'll find in the library. So definitely a good way to gauge what your audience might be seeing sort of inadvertently while they're browsing the web. Okay. Our second poll. Unfortunately, all of our fun interactive stuff comes very early in the slideshow, so bear with me. But poll 2, how much do you think it costs to purchase an ad that could potentially reach more than 1 million people? So less than 100, between $100 and $500, 500 to 1,000, less than 1,000, more than 1,000, excuse me.
Feels like we're some kind of game show, just watching the numbers go up of people voting.
I know, I love game shows. This is made for me.
Give it 2 more seconds. We're at 73% of people have voted. Come on, the last 12 people holding out their vote. Tell us what you think. No one's going to know what it is. And I do, to Adam's comment in the chat, there is some irony in having to convince people that their responses are going to be anonymous when we're talking about Facebook ads and all the data that is collected through our online activity.
Yeah.
Right, so let's have a look at the results. 88%. And you can see them on your screen, Maddy, I think, but 43% of people say that they need less than $100. 30% think that we need between $100 and $500. 13% split both across 500 to $1,000 and then more than $1,000.
Yeah, well, so the answer, unfortunately, is that it varies, but it looks like we have a very smart audience because you can absolutely get an ad that has a reach of potentially more than 1 million people for less than $100. So the ad shown here was run this week by NARAL Pro-Choice America, which is an advocacy org that promotes pro-choice legislation. And we sort of zoomed in on the bottom here. They paid less than $100 for a potential reach of more than 1 million people. So Facebook ads are super cheap and easy to make with a huge reach, which is why they're so important. And it's so important that we understand what's being shown on there. Because it's really easy to churn out and get a huge, huge audience, a really loud megaphone, as we in the industry like to say. The other thing that this slide really brings up is that everything on the Facebook ad archive is a range or an estimate. You're not going to get a ton of really great specific data. There are a couple of things, like the number of ads run will be an exact number. But for the most part, definitely take everything with a grain of salt. That Facebook has a reputation for hanging on pretty tightly to their data, and that's absolutely true in the ads archive. You're never going to get an exact dollar amount for how much an ad cost, and potential reach is an estimate based on an algorithm. It's not an exact measure of how many people have seen the ad. So the first way, so this is from Laura, who runs her own business page. Just an example of how cheap this is, offering 2,000 fresh viewers every day for a post that costs 10 euros, which I unfortunately don't know what that is in any other currency.
£10 is going to be
pounds,
some round maybe like $12, something like that.
Really cheap, really easy to make. A Facebook ad is as easy as making a Facebook status and then paying to have it boosted to potentially 1 million people. So super important that we understand what's going on here. So the first way to get to a Facebook page is ads, and Laura taught me how to make GIFs before I made this presentation, so thank you for indulging me. There's going to be a lot of GIFs. Is to navigate to a page that you're interested in, scroll all the way to the right and all the way down, and click the page transparency box, which also has a ton of other interesting information. I could do a whole separate slideshow about all the things you can find just on a Facebook page, but you're going to click that See More button on the page transparency box, scroll down on that box, and then click See All Ads. It's relatively self-explanatory once you're there. So this is the easiest way to pop out to the ad library. I recommend doing this if you see a page in your area that's potentially putting out harmful content and you're wondering, are they paying to have this harmful content boosted to people who aren't choosing to see it? You can easily just pop from the page into the ad library and go from there. But the more complicated way is to travel to the ad library itself, which is this URL that we put on the page here. The first thing you're going to want to do when you get to the ad library is determine which country you're interested in researching. So up in the upper right hand corner, there's a country drop-down menu, and you can choose, ads are purchased within specific countries, so you can choose where you're interested in looking at. I don't believe you can target ads to more than one area, so they're all housed within a specific country category. There's different categories depending on the country you're in. Most countries have 2 search functions, an all ad search function and an issue, electoral, or political search function. The United States has a 3rd search function, the housing search, because Facebook got in a bunch of hot water a couple years ago when some reporting came out about how their ad policy allowed like real estate ads and lease application ads, and I believe housing is extended to like credit and other sort of financial institutions, allowed those ads to be targeted towards specific demographics that was leading to a lot of discrimination. So they added this 3rd function, housing, as an effort to sort of increase transparency there, but I believe that that's only available in the United States. So each of these tabs functions a little bit differently. So the all ads tab, you have to know the page that you want to look at. So you can't type in a keyword, and you can type in things and it will autofill suggestions, but the autofill suggestions have never made sense to me. It's not a great place to experiment. The only time I would recommend using this tab is if you know exactly the page you want to look at. So in this GIF here, I tried typing in coronavirus, it pops up a little error message, but I type in World Health Organization and can pop over and see all of their ads. The housing tab functions very similarly to this. You have to know the page, except in the housing tab, you can also plug in a specific area. So I'm in New Hampshire right now. I could go over to the housing tab, plug in New Hampshire, and see all of the real estate credit ads that were being run in New Hampshire. The political, electoral, or social issue ad search is really where the fun is to be had, because you can search for specific keywords here. So in this example, we type in COVID and it pops us out to a COVID search term return. And there's a bunch of options for filtering and discovering different things. Again, like everything I'm going to show you here, it comes with a huge grain of salt that it's likely not comprehensive. Sometimes you're going to get results that it don't make sense to you. A lot of the time, if you get a result and you don't see the keyword you typed in, that's because it's in an article, it's associated with the ad, but I found ads that I could not tell you why they were returned for specific keywords. It works best with one keyword. You can try phrases, but you can't do any fun Boolean things. You can't use quotation marks. Yeah, I would recommend pretty much sticking to one keyword, but you can get really fancy with that. Like we do coronavirus searches and COVID searches, but we also sometimes plug in like some of the more xenophobic terms for coronavirus to see if anybody is running sort of bigoted advertising and see what pops up with that sort of stuff. You can get creative. And then once you've typed in your keyword, there's a bunch of options for filtering. So you can filter by country. That's very similar to the opening we talked about on the right-hand side. Clicking your country, you can only click one. You can also click all country. So you can either search for all country or one specific. You can't pick multiple countries. You can pick multiple regions. So the region box is new. Well, kind of. Facebook had it and then it disappeared and then they had it again. So be warned that this may disappear at any moment, but we were very excited to see that it had popped back up again. Regions are defined differently depending on what country you're in. So in the United States, region is states. In the UK, region, I believe, is nations. So Scotland, Wales, etc. In Singapore, it's like directional, like Eastern region, Western region. It depends on the country, but you can click more than one region. So if you're in the United States and you want to see all the COVID ads that are being targeted towards New England states, you can click those 7 states and plug those in. 7? I should know that. The next box over, active and inactive, is the term that Facebook uses for essentially, are they still running? So active ads are currently being shown to people, inactive ads have been discontinued. Again, supposedly Facebook houses all the ads that have been shown on their platforms and multiple platforms, again, not just Facebook, but take that with a grain of salt. We don't know how comprehensive it is, but yeah, you can look at just ads that are running right now. Impressions by recency, you can choose ads that have gotten views in the past 7 days, 30 days, or 90 days, I believe, maybe 60 days as well. Advertiser and disclaimer. This is a really important thing to remember. So I'm slowing down because I can tell I'm talking a little fast. Advertiser and disclaimer is going to be important when we talk about data analysis. So the advertiser is the page that's running an ad. The disclaimer is the company that has signed the check, the company that is paying for the ad. So we can see here, Patagonia is running this ad, but Patagonia Inc. is the disclaimer, is the company that's paying for it. Here, City of Carlsbad, New Mexico is the page running the ad, so that's the advertiser, but the disclaimer, the person paying for it, is quote unquote social media manager. Facebook does not vet their disclaimers very well, so sometimes you'll see, like here, social media manager, that's not a company. I don't know what that is or who that is. Sometimes it'll be a single person's name. Sometimes there'll be typos. Sometimes they'll say Inc., sometimes they won't, and it'll change depending on the ad. But that's important that disclaimers, so the company that are paying for the ad can run on any number of advertising pages. Then you can also sort by platform. Again, this is going to be Facebook, Instagram, the audience network, and Messenger. I don't mess with this too much because I mostly just want to see everything. And also a lot of ads are run on multiple platforms. Like most ads are, none of these ones are, but most ads are run on Facebook and Instagram or Facebook and Messenger. Because again, it's not very expensive to run it on multiple platforms. So people opt to do that. And then potential reach. So this is another tricky vernacular thing that Facebook does. Reach and impressions are two different things. So reach is measuring the unique viewers of your ads, and impressions is measuring total views. So impressions might be counting the same viewer viewing the ad more than once, and reach is supposedly measuring new users viewing the ad. Again, that's all sort of conjecture because different people might be using the same device, or they can't really be sure. And also these are all estimates. If you click on this drop-down menu, it's ranges. So it's like 1K to 5K for potential reach, but you can delineate if you just want to see big ads or you just want to see small ads. You can choose from there too. And then the last thing to remember is that in the upper right-hand corner here, there's a sort by, which I was very excited to see, but unfortunately, the only options that they give you is sorting by impressions, either low to high or high to low. So you can see if it's been shown a lot or not a lot. Not that exciting, but can be sometimes helpful. I sometimes sort by impressions, high to low, just because I want to see things that are reaching big audiences. So this was an article put out by TechCrunch, and I believe a couple other outlets also covered this. Facebook claimed that they were going to take down ads that were marketing masks when the pandemic really got going. And TechCrunch found that there was a bunch still running mask ads, and this likely was just a simple search on the political ad bar. If you type in masks, if you type in protective gear, if you type in PPE and see that it's returning results, specifically if they're active results still, that's a clear sign that Facebook's policy wasn't working the way that they thought it was. So just an example of how this can potentially be used. Any questions?
That's actually really fortuitous, because I was just telling someone in the chat that I was going to ask you about it. If you go back to those search results that you got, Maddy, where you put in coronavirus or COVID, the one before, yeah. Do you have any idea why that Patagonia ad came up?
I don't. So like I said, a lot of them, if we could scroll down on this, this Patagonia ad, I believe, had an associated article. So a lot of these ads, it'll come up in a different slide, but if you see the full ad at the bottom, it says learn more, and they've attached a URL. And a lot of the time the keywords pop up in the URL. But honestly, no, I don't always know. And I don't know how Facebook delineates that. And I definitely have seen ads, like our very first slide, when we go to the page and go down to the transparency box and click on those ads, I found ads using that method that I couldn't find using a keyword that I know is in the ad. So it doesn't always make a ton of sense. Hopefully Facebook will improve that. I'm not holding my breath, but it's possible.
Got two more questions. Number one, can you just quickly show us again where it says reach and impressions? So if you go back to that slide where we were, Maddy.
Yes. So there is no sorting mechanism. Okay, well, you can't sort by impression ranges on this function. Impressions is going to come up again when we talk about the ad details. You can sort by reach right here. So again, reach is unique impressions or unique viewers. Impressions is total times it was shown to eyeballs. You can sort by impressions, but all this means is sorting either impressions low to high or impressions high to low. So like when you go to Urban Outfitters, you can sort price low to high, price high to low, same sort of thing.
We've got a really good question about that, this distinguishing difference that you made between advertiser and disclaimer. Says, could a random person pay to promote an ad that they're not actually affiliated with, that they have nothing to do with, but they're just a fan of it and they wanna pay to promote that content just because they like it and they're big fans?
Absolutely, and it happens all the time. There's like a lot of weird Johns and Williams that pop up when you do the data analysis that I can't really figure out why they're promoting certain ads. A lot of times that happens with political ads, like specifically about candidates or election issues, that I imagine are people who, you know, maybe would be donating to a candidate if this wasn't an option and think this is another way to get their voice heard or whatever. But yeah, you have to, there is a process you have to go through to promote political ads. You have to, in the United States, you have to have a US ID or passport, and you do have to be the admin of a business page. But if you're the admin of a business page, you can partner with pretty much any other page and you can make a business page without a lot of effort to promote content that's not really related to whatever your business page might be.
Amazing. And just another two quick questions. I think one you're going to touch upon when we move forward a little bit. Is it possible to scrape the ad library? Kind of.
We will talk about that. Yes. Yes is pretty much the answer. Yeah, they give you API access, kind of. And that, I think, is actually our last slide. So hang tight.
Yeah, hang tight. And last one, and we'll move forward. Can the country location of the people managing the page be manipulated?
Absolutely. So I would never trust location markers on anything you find on the internet, just as a rule of thumb. Well, okay, now that I think about it, in the United States, you do have to provide a passport. I don't know how thoroughly that's vetted. The other thing is there's a huge market for like pages that were set up and approved to sell ads in the United States they can be transferred to somebody else. So like if I set up a page with my United States license, I can sell it to Laura in the UK pretty easily, and she can just use my credentials to run ads. So yeah, I would just, as a rule of thumb, never trust any location markers on the internet. There are complicated things like VPNs and, war room hacker stuff you can do, but there's also really easy things like, just getting a friend to buy the ad for you. Great question.
Excellent. Onwards and upwards, Maddy. Keep going.
All right. Okay, so a few more little tips and tricks about how to go about navigating the search function. So there is this keyword search box that pops up sometimes, but not all the time. And also, I suspect they've changed when it pops up. So be warned that this might be out of date in another year. I will probably be out of date in another year. Facebook changes a lot. But let's see here, this little keyword box only pops up if you either go over to issue electoral or political and click a specific page, so you can't do a keyword search, or on the all ads function, click a specific page, and then as this little GIF does, toggle over here to the issue electoral or political, and then it'll populate this search term, and you can search within the ads from a specific page. So maybe you want to see your local select board candidates if they're running any ads about coronavirus. You can click on their candidate page. As long as you're in the issue electoral or political function, you can go over to this keyword box and type in, again, coronavirus, COVID, pandemic, any number of keywords, and see how they're talking about it. The last thing I'll share, and I don't use this really ever, but some pages will populate a box that says similar regional ads. So Patagonia here, you can see the New Zealand ads, the Australia ads, the France ads. Mostly this is comes up with brands. It isn't particularly helpful when you're doing like issue type research, but I do think it's interesting when it pops up and when it doesn't pop up. So like Patagonia has all these similar regional ads. Ben and Jerry's has a bunch of similar regional ads, but like I should double check this, but I'm pretty sure the WHO doesn't necessarily have regional ads, even though they're certainly have different pages run in different countries and are running different ads in different places. So I do think it's kind of interesting to explore when this is and isn't showing up, but overall, I don't use it super often. Maybe somebody in the audience here will prove me wrong and it will be super helpful. But it's just good to know that it's there. Okay, so digging into the nitty gritty of an ad. So once you found an ad that you think is interesting, you're gonna wanna scroll to the bottom of the ad in your search function, click see all ad details, and then you can see the demographic data of where the ad was targeted to, as well as some information about the disclaimer, not the advertiser, the disclaimer. So this should be called disclaimer info, but it's tricky because the disclaimer is the person that's chose to advertise the thing. So once you've found the info page, you're going to want to hit this little arrow, information from the advertiser, and this is going to give you a bunch of information that they're required to put in when they purchase the ad, address, website, email, some other things. A lot of the time these things are not completely filled out. Sometimes there's some suspicious stuff. Like we found some ads once that we were looking into, and the address that they had provided was a WeWork space. So we were like, okay, that seems suspect. The about disclaimer box that's just above here is really tempting and looks exciting, but all it does is give you this sort of elevator pitch for how Facebook deals with political ads. I would not recommend reading it all. It's not super illuminating or helpful. So yeah, Facebook isn't great about vetting this part of the ads process. So you can sometimes find interesting things here. I believe, we have an example here. In the UK election, a former Tory minister was found to be running a bunch of ads attacking Corbyn. I think the page was called like Parents' Choice, and I want to say
it was called something like that. Yeah, it was kind of like a parents group, but it was actually being run by a former Conservative minister, and it was like quietly paying for a bunch of advertising to attack the Labour opposition leader. And if you just looked at the disclaimer, you would have seen the parents group, but you had to dig deep into who this parents group was and who was managing it to make that link to the former Conservative minister. It was really, really interesting. Yeah, exactly. So it was something like the website for this parents group had been set up like 2 weeks earlier,
and the address was like a PO box or something. So yeah, the disclaimer, I would definitely recommend poking around there if you have suspicious pages that you're interested in exploring. That's where I spend a lot of my time. You can look at, sometimes that'll lead you to like 990s or other sort of investigative reporting tips that I'm sure we'll cover in a number of other webinars. Yeah, disclaimer is really important. And again, that's the person paying for the ad, not the page running the ad necessarily. So on the left-hand side of your ad info box, so you searched your keyword, you found an interesting ad, you scrolled to the bottom and clicked see more info. On the left-hand side of what comes up, right-hand side of what comes up, you're gonna get some demographic data. So I've split this up. This will all appear on the right-hand side, but I took it away from being stacked so you can see both of these boxes. So first you're gonna see the amount spent on the ad, the potential reach, the estimated impressions. You're also gonna see, and this is updated relatively in real time, like this ad is still running, so this will likely change as the days go by. Then you're gonna see the demographics breakdown by gender and age of who this ad was shown to. So this is based on, when you buy an ad, you get to pick who you wanna target it to. There was just a really great report that came out that said one of the options for ad targeting data is people interested in pseudoscience. So you can, if you're promoting like a homeopathic remedies or whatever, you can target that to specifically people who have indicated they have interest in those sorts of things. So yeah, I came from the repro rights world, and I used to think it was really interesting to go to all of the like Students for Life or like pro-life generation pages and see who they were targeting, because often it was people that were like 45 plus, so not totally lining up with their mission. So lots of interesting things you can see here. And then also it'll show you a regional breakdown. In the United States, it's a pretty map like this where you can hover over each state and see what percentage of their viewership is in these specific areas. In other countries, it's usually a bar graph. So not as pretty, but still gives you some information. And in some countries where there aren't a ton of Facebook ads run, it will, instead of presenting the bar graph by region, it will present the bar graph by country. So like I was looking at an ad in Japan, and instead of regions of Japan, it was like, here's the percentage shown in Japan, here's the percentage shown in other countries. So just be cautious that you might not always get the information you're looking for. And again, all these are estimates. None of this is like hard and fast quantitative. I mean, it's quantitative data, but it's based on an estimate of average page views and internet activity of Facebook users, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, any questions?
Yeah, we've actually got two really good questions. So the first one, I'm actually going to ask them in the opposite order. So talking about those interests of how these ads are targeted, how does Facebook know what people's interests are? Is this based on your background or the things that you've liked, or a combination of both? Or do we just not know what's our best guess?
So some of them are self-reporting. So gender and age, I believe, are based on self-reporting data. I think racial demographics as well is self-reported. But the interests are based on pages you've liked, things you've interacted with, things you've shared. So yeah, you should be wary of the footprint that you yourself are leaving on Facebook too. And sometimes I think it's kind of interesting to see what ads are being targeted to me based on certain things. Occasionally I'll just like type in things I don't care about to try to throw off the Facebook algorithm. I think they're probably too good at it, and I'm not really fooling anyone, but yeah, it's based on your activity. Everything you do on Facebook is tracked by them. Facebook makes a lot of their money off of collecting all of your data. So that's how they get, you can target ads towards really weird, like people who like cats but don't like dogs, like really weird specific categories of things.
Another question on demographics. Is there anything we should consider about the standard Facebook demographic when we're looking at the who was shown the ad?
What do you mean by the standard Facebook?
I'm guessing we're talking about the different kind of like characteristics that we can look at. So you've mentioned age, you've mentioned gender, you've mentioned race. Are there any other kind of markers that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, you can't view a ton of it. So that's a bummer of the Facebook ad library, is they give the advertiser really specific targeting options. So again, pseudoscience or any number, if you're interested in like the Chicago Bulls or whatever, you can be targeted with Jordan's ads. But we don't get access to that. So pretty much the only thing we can see is age, gender, location. I don't know if that answers your question.
It answers mine, but doesn't actually answer the one that was in the chat because I completely misunderstood it. They've explained now a little bit more. So for example, like, are there more women on Facebook than men? He's just looking at a couple of ads and seeing that they're being shown to way more women than men, and he doesn't see why that would really be the case. But that also might depend on the ad, right? And on the wording or where they're going.
Yeah, definitely. So it is important to remember who, to think about who's on Facebook. Well, so a couple things. It's important to think about who's on Facebook, but also keep in mind that this is housing Instagram ads and Facebook Audience Network ads. So I think that those things have pretty vastly different demographics, but also then it's harder to measure the demographics because we don't have as much access to demographic data on HuffPo readers as we do people who are, self-identifying as Jewish on Facebook. Like, there's no checkbox to check your religion when you go to a HuffPo article. But the other thing is that the information that shows up in the targeting data isn't necessarily affected by the people on Facebook because it's not like a percentage of the total of people on Facebook. So if there's a ton of women on Facebook, Facebook is 75% women, 25% men, you can still target your ads exclusively to men. So it's not like the lopsidedness there necessarily affects the information that we get about how it was targeted, if that makes sense.
Let's go to a question on reach. So what determines the true reach of an ad on Facebook? For example, why would an ad with a kind of potential reach of 1 million reach more or less people?
So reach has to do, it's an algorithm and it's complicated. And again, it's an estimate. And also, I would say take all of this with a grain of salt because all of this is what Facebook tells us it is. So, we don't know how good their algorithm is necessarily, but reach has to do with, like, if you pick the Chicago Bulls and Gatorade as your targeting data, they're going to send it out to their pages that they have, or that their users that they have identified as being potentially interested in those things. And they have an algorithm that decides how many times do these people log in, how many times do they scroll down the timeline, how many times are they, how many times are they navigating to different pages that you might be running your ad on. So it's all internal Facebook data about the targeting that you choose. What is their guess for how many people are going to see it based on what that means for where it's shown, if that makes sense. It's all very complicated. And again, we could find out in a year that none of this is accurate, that Facebook has I don't know, not even like maliciously obscured it, but just maybe messed up on what their estimate of how many people interact with, their Gatorade pages are. It's all based on algorithms and estimates.
And that's important to remember, isn't it? That we're dealing with like ballparks and potential and the beginning of a story rather than solid data that you can point to specifically. Absolutely.
And things, there isn't necessarily a ton of room for sociology in there. So like if their estimate for, what's an example? Like if their estimate for people interested in hiking was from before the pandemic, and then all of a sudden people stopped visiting hiking pages because nobody can go outside, we don't necessarily know that their algorithm has adjusted in real time to that change. So yeah, there's a ton of caveats to all of this sort of data.
Two more questions and then we'll keep going. So a question on safety. So do you recommend having two Facebook accounts, one to do your reporting so that your algorithm is tailored to that, and one for you as a normal human person just having a life on Facebook?
Well, I don't know if I am legally allowed to recommend that because I don't think that in the Facebook terms of service, okay, so I don't actually know, and this is something I should probably know. I don't know if you can have more than one account. I know you cannot have an imposter account. So like you can't have a fake persona on Facebook. That goes against their terms of service and they can kick you off the platform entirely. But I think you can have like a professional page and a personal page. So that might be something to consider. But yeah, I would just be really careful. Facebook does not want you making more than one account. So if you try to do that, a lot of the time they will ask you some weird security questions or lock you out of your account for a certain amount of time. If you open too many tabs at once, like that's a big problem I have with research because I'm clicking on a bunch of things all at once. It'll lock you out of your Facebook for a couple hours. So I would say from a purely empirical perspective, yeah, it would be, well, okay, but also searching the ad library isn't based on your data. So you're not going to get, well, I assume you're not going to get different results for your keyword searches based on your ad preferences, your personal ad preferences. And also I believe you can search, no, I think you have to have a Facebook account. So for searching and downloading and analyzing data, it doesn't really matter. But if you want to explore the interface, like if you want to browse through Facebook and see what's getting targeted to you, yeah, that is impacted by what your activity on Facebook is.
And if anyone's interested, all of these questions are also around the ethics of that, the questions that reporters have to grapple with when they're going into these spaces, and how much of their own information do they show? Do you tell them who you are and what you're doing, looking at different pages and stuff, which might not be the same as like the ad library on its own, but we have a guide with interesting thoughts around those things that I'll leave in the chat box as well. Last question and we'll move on, Maddy. So any tips for looking for misleading ads, such as spreading misinformation about coronavirus or rumors about voting by mail is canceled or is not going to work? And if you're going to answer it in your next section, then let's just move on. But otherwise, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the next section is going to cover data analysis, and there are some tips and tricks there that will help you figure out like maybe suspicious advertisers, things like that. But the best tip that I can give you for working from the front end, from the Facebook ad archive, is make sure you're paying attention to the language that people are using. So like I said, we'll type in things like China virus to see the people that are using that terminology to describe the pandemic. Or, if we're looking into vote by mail, maybe we'll plug in ballot harvesting because that's been a big keyword. So it's the same for searching any platform, that you want to think in the language that the things you're looking for are using. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is making sure that your keywords are associated with what you actually want to find. Section.
Fabulous. Shall we move on?
Shall we? Okay. Okay, so this is the data section, and data sometimes looks a little bit intimidating, but I promise that none of this is difficult. And also, the great thing about all of this, like the insider term for it is OSINT, open source intelligence. And the great thing about the OSINT community is that they are open. So if you ever have a question, I often just like Google, like, can I figure out the hometown of this person who's running this ad? And somebody online will have answered that question somewhere. So if you get confused at all, first of all, feel free to ask us. First Draft is happy to help, but also there's a ton of blogs and information and articles on the internet to help you sort of reorient yourself to this stuff. So the Facebook ad library report is a big data dump of all, very importantly, political ads. So it's not all ads on the Facebook platform. It's all ads that have been deemed issue political or electoral. It's very hard to figure out how exactly Facebook goes about delineating that. I assume that it's keyword based, also maybe advertiser based. You'll definitely find ads that are not deemed issue electoral and political that maybe should be. More commonly, you'll find ads that are deemed electoral that don't really seem to make a ton of sense. So yeah, again, caveats to all of this, take it with a huge grain of salt. So the Facebook ad library report is something you can download that's a comprehensive look of all of the political ads that are running on the platform. So to get there, you navigate again to the ad library like we talked about, scroll all the way to the bottom and click ad library report. It's going to drop you into this landing page. It's very pretty, and there's a couple things you can do here. So it'll tell you totals. Currently the total is from May 2018. So maybe that's all the ads that they have archived. Again, they're not super transparent about that. The total number of ads, the total amount spent. It'll show you top searches from the past week. I do not trust this. They had, Elizabeth Warren ran an ad where she was trying to prove a point about being able to lie in ads. This was a news story a while ago. But one of the keywords from her ads was the top search for like months. And I just don't buy that that's accurate. So top searches can be kind of interesting, give you something to explore and look into, but I wouldn't necessarily report on it like it's hard and fast data. Below that, you're going to find the spending tracker for the country that you're looking at. The US 2021 was a lot more exciting when there were more candidates. Bloomberg's was like way off the screen. The interesting thing about the ad tracker is that you can use custom dates. It's the only place on the ad archive where you can use custom dates. You can toggle between a bar graph and a line graph. The line graph's kind of interesting, seeing spikes. That can be, yeah, somewhat useful sometimes. If you scroll down a little bit further, you're gonna see spending by advertiser, depending on which date range you choose. At the top here, there's a bunch of different date ranges you can pick. This date will change depending on where you choose. And then you'll get a delineation of the top, again, only top political advertisers. Below that, spending by location, very similar to how we talked about it with the ad details. You can hover over states and see percentages and things. Again, you can toggle between different areas. But I personally think the most exciting part is if you scroll all the way, oh, okay, well, so this is an article that was definitely just using this top spender box. The Washington Post published an article about how Penzeys Spices was running like a ton of political ads. They were the highest, I think, left-leaning political ads consistently, which is rare for a spice company. You don't usually see that. And that was as simple as just looking at this landing page. They got that big headline. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can download the ad library report. And this is where the like interesting data stuff comes in. So whichever date range you chose at the beginning here is going to be the data that you end up with. So you can choose last day, last 7 days, but remember to pick the one you want before you click download. You're going to go down, click download, and then head to your downloads folder. And it's going to be a big folder like this. There's a couple different things it gives you. It gives you the ad report delineated by advertisers. So it'll show you advertiser and disclaimer, and then the amount they spent, the number of ads. It also shows the same thing, but for locations. So it'll say New Hampshire, amount of ads, amount spent. You can also click on specific regions. So I could click New Hampshire, and then I would get the top advertisers in New Hampshire. So once you've decided, I spend most of my time on this first one, the advertisers. Once you've decided what you're interested in exploring, click and open it. You can do this in Excel. You can also, I often do it in Google Sheets. You can do the same thing in pretty much any spreadsheet type application, the same thing that I'm about to show you. Okay, and again, this is gonna feel a little bit advanced, but I promise this stuff is not difficult. So the first thing you wanna do is, well, so this is stuff you can also do on that landing page. This is, again, that Penzeys Spice headline. All it was looking at the top spenders. But I often do it in the spreadsheet function. Something that's interesting is that the top spenders are not always the people with the top amount of ads. So in this example, I don't know if you can, oh, Laura taught me how to zoom in.
It's Command Option 8, wherever your cursor is.
So you can see the top amount spent is the US Census Bureau, which makes sense. They're trying really hard to make sure everybody takes it. But the top number of ads by a significant amount is this company called Smart News, which I don't know who Smart News is. Probably want to look into that. It seems kind of a fishy name. I do know who Smart News is. It's like a news aggregate out of Japan. We've looked into it. It is what it is. But so that's another way to find things that you maybe want to explore. So after you've fiddled with that and seen what there is to see, I would recommend making a pivot table. This is the most complicated part, but again, not difficult, I promise. So you're gonna go up to the top corner here, click your little corner cell, so between the 1 and the A, so it selects all your data. You go to data, drop down, summarize with pivot table. It's gonna pop you into another sheet. So down here, there'll be a sheet 1 over here. See, sheet 1. And then pivot tables allow you to compare different variables, to cross-tabulate different variables. My favorite variables to compare is disclaimer, and the amount of times I do disclaimer and then count of disclaimer. So the amount of times that a disclaimer is showing up in our spreadsheet. So what that means is that a disclaimer, which again is that advertiser, the person that's paying for the ads, the amount of pages that they're running on. So here we see AARP is running ads on 57 different pages, which makes sense because AARP has a ton of state pages. So it's like AARP Pennsylvania, and they run ads on all of those. But I've highlighted here some things that I would probably look into. Resource Media is running on 9 different pages. I Love My Freedom is paying for ads on 8 different pages. I think that's really interesting. But you can cross-tabulate any number of variables. So you could do disclaimer and then total amount spent. So you could see which company is paying the most for ads. Yeah, any of the variables. There's not a ton. I mean, page name, disclaimer, amount spent, number of ads. Any of the variables that pop up here, you can compare them to each other. And that's how you get the really interesting data like this. So this was out of Michigan. There was a sort of fake news, yeah, I feel comfortable calling them fake news site, that was like posing as local news, sort of. So they were pushing out super partisan content, but their pages were like the Lansing Sun or like Detroit Town Gazette or some things that sound really close to real newspapers, and sort of purport to be trustworthy. But the way that the easy way to find this, I'm not sure that that's what these journalists did, but the easy way to find this is to do that disclaimer sorting. So if, I think it was called something Sun Times was the page that was paying for it, but we'll call it XYZ Media was paying for ads on 7 different pages, and they went and looked, and it was these weird Lansing Sun, Detroit Gazette or whatever, looked into it and realized they were all getting paid for, or all the ads were getting paid for by the same company. They're all pushing out super partisan content. We're not telling their audiences that they were connected in any way. And that's how you end up with stories like this. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is the API, which I think somebody asked. This is the scraping end of things.
Before we go to the scraping, Maddy, because that kind of takes us into phase number 3 of how hard or how complicated the work we do on Facebook Ads Library goes to. Can you just run us through again why a certain disclaimer can be running ads on multiple pages? Like, what is that relationship, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so like, if there's a I love ice cream page and an ice cream for all page and ice cream RS page, Ben and Jerry's can buy ads on all of those pages. And that's not necessarily suspicious. Like, they know that people probably want to see Ben and Jerry's ads on those pages if they love ice cream enough to like those pages. But when it gets tricky is when it isn't necessarily super obvious that things are connected. Like, again, with these, Lansing Sun seems independent and trustworthy and local, but it's connected to 8 other supposedly local news sites that are actually run, I don't know this fact, but let's say they were run by a dude out of Pennsylvania. So it's all of these Michigan viewers who are thinking that they're getting local trusted news sources, but they're actually getting somebody's political views pushed through pseudo local sites. And the ads being run on those pages aren't necessarily the issue, but the fact that they're all connected can be discovered through the ads. Did I answer that?
Perfect.
Question?
And yeah, and one more before we move on. So the amount that shows on that spreadsheet that you just showed us of the data that you download, I'm guessing that's in dollars for our international viewers, just to check the currency.
Yes, great question. I don't know the fact, but I imagine that it depends on, so what I downloaded was in the US, and I imagined that if you downloaded it in a different country, it would be in the local currency. Because I know if you're working in the UK and you go to the ad details, it's going to give it to you in pounds. So I imagine the same is true when you download the library, but I will double check on that.
Perfect. Let's tackle the API.
I'm not going to go too far into the API. My genius colleague Rory can give you a ton of advice if anybody has any specific questions, if anybody is really deep into this stuff and wants help with a specific ask or building some type of script, please reach out. We can connect you with him. But the API is how you go about scraping the ad library. They make it relatively transparent, kind of. If you Google the ad library, it's going to be one of the drop-down things, as you can see here. You click the API. There's certain bureaucratic steps you have to go through to get access, confirm your identity, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you have that you're going to have access to data that they don't make it as easy for you. Like there's no fun, fancy landing page the way there is with the ad library report. But you're just going to get CSV files, I believe, data dumps, that you can put into any number of data processing applications. Like if you have Python skills, I think that's the way most people do it. The thing about the Facebook ad library API is that it gives you information on specific ads. So where the ad library report gives you information on advertisers and locations, the API will give you specific ads. So like I said earlier, the keyword searches, not super comprehensive always. I'm assuming, I just have noticed some mistakes, which makes me think they're not super comprehensive. Not always in a super logical order, but the API, you can use some data skills to do a keyword search there that's much more comprehensive. So you can more conclusively and confidently say, we looked at all the ads that mentioned coronavirus, because in the API, they'll give you the descriptor that you can filter through a data processing script. But you do have to have some remedial data skills, as you can see by this scary, complicated looking. But it's really not that difficult. I'm currently working on my Python skills, and it's just like a video game. It's really not that hard if you get into it. It's just, it can be kind of time consuming. It also can take time, like to run a script. I always think of our computers as being pretty much beyond like memory issues now, but they are not. If something is huge, if the data set is huge, it's going to take like a couple hours maybe to run through it all. Yeah, does anybody have specific questions about the API? Because I can try to answer those, but I'm not going to go through like, it's a little bit complicated to get access to and complicated to run script. So I'm not going to do a live demonstration, but if people have specific questions, I'm happy to try and answer those.
I don't think there are many popping up, but two things just to highlight. There is one, just as I said that. What are some of the most useful search functions in the API? So you mentioned the descriptor, so you can do a more thorough keyword search. And then someone else is asking, I don't get the API to, what's it for? So I always forget what API stands for. But it's basically when you get access to the back end, so you can do your own, you can perform your own search, right? So the Facebook ad library has an interface where you can type something in and it'll show up your results. But if you're using the API, you're actually going into the interface and kind of performing your own search and scraping them on your own. Application programming interface,
so as usual,
someone in the chat.
Yes, as usual, Laura said it better than I could. It's, yeah, you're getting access to the back end of things. And again, the most useful thing about this is that it'll give you, so like we looked at that quote unquote comprehensive data before on the Excel sheet, the only data analysis you can do with that is based on advertiser totals or location totals. This, you can look at specific ads. So you could look at the amount of money spent on all ads about Michael Jordan. You can't do that in the ad library unless you type in Michael Jordan and hand calculate the estimate of every ad that's on there. And even then, I wouldn't necessarily guarantee that was comprehensive. So the ad library API gives you access to ad data as opposed to just advertiser data.
And I'm guessing for those of us who kind of work in journalism or reporting, it's that kind of distinction between when you're using the API, you're collecting macro data to tell stories and numbers, and the Facebook ad library helps you see those relationships and networks that give you places to start asking questions, right? Those interesting, why is this person paying for this ad in this place? And then it's the beginning of a story or the beginning of the thing that you're starting to dig into.
Right, which is, yeah, absolutely why I call myself an investigative researcher and not a data scientist. I'm more interested in things that seem suspicious, very interested in data too, but that's why we have Rory and other wonderful colleagues that can sort of enrich, we find the suspicious tidbits, the things to look into, and then we'll give Rory like an ask. Like, we think this network is running weird ads. Can you see, all the ones that they're running about coronavirus? And he can do that for us through the API.
So find yourself a friendly data scientist to help you out. And two more questions, Maddy. One about, do you know if the data that you can get through these scrapers shows the currency that the disclaimer paid it in?
I believe, okay, I'm going to say this, and this is an assumption, not an absolute fact, but I think that the API is also delineated by country. So the currency that you purchase an ad in is based on where the country of the purchaser, the disclaimer. And I think that now, I know I'm not willing to say that confidently, but my assumption would be that the API is split up by country. So you can scrape based on, I think it's in the currency of the home country, but I would have to double check on that.
Yeah, we'll take it as homework and send
Yes.
and ask Rory what he thinks. Same about from the API data again, so we might want to take this one home and research a little bit more. Can you see true reach and engagement when you're scraping those kind of numbers?
No, because reach, so engagement is a little bit different. Engagement would be measuring clicks, but reach and impressions are all estimates. Well, yeah, are all estimates, I believe.
Wonderful. And one last one, is there a similar tool for LinkedIn? Do we know?
I don't know if LinkedIn has an API. I know Twitter has an API, WhatsApp, I believe also.
Yep.
I don't know about LinkedIn. We're working on whether or not Nextdoor has an API, but I'm not sure about LinkedIn. That's a really good question. LinkedIn is a great research tool. If anybody is interested in stalking their family members, LinkedIn is a great place to start.
I think we're all good for questions for now, Maddy. Is there anything else you want to walk us through?
No, I think I have talked at you for long enough. But please feel free to reach out. I love talking about the ad library. If you have questions or you want to just bounce ideas, talk about places to start looking, definitely let me know.
So if just to remind you guys before we say goodbye, and thank you guys for all having joined us today, we've got a couple of resources online that are 100% free and available for you guys to consult in your own time and share with your colleagues. As Maddy said, we're also really happy to be contacted directly. I think we all do this kind of work because we're problem solvers and we like asking questions and being like, oh, I wonder why that's happening. So 100% reach out. This webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to rewatch it back. And we'll find out some of those answers. Go ask Rory and Carlotta, who are our data scientists, who will know a little bit more about them that Maddy and I do, because I'm not a data scientist either. So the first resource that I want to tell you guys about and remind you about, if you haven't already seen it, I think it's in the next slide, Maddy, and it's our toolkit. I think is the next slide. Have I got it wrong? Yes. So we have a live dashboard with a bunch of tools organized by the type of either platform that they let you investigate or the kind of thing that they help you do. So for example, verifying images, verifying video, verifying accounts. And it's the one link that you need to kind of bookmark. You've got the bit.ly on the left-hand side of the screen, and it is our job to keep that updated. So a lot of these tools sometimes come and go and they die, or like the way these platforms work changes, or there's a change in the API and some of the tools that we were using before don't work. We keep this dashboard updated with stuff that is still current and working. It has a special section on the right-hand side with coronavirus specific tools. And also if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you get access to our advanced toolkit, which has way more tools, a lot of them related to ad libraries. So for example, Snapchat has an ad library that you can also interact with, and some of the other ones that you can have a look at and play with in your own time. And then the second resource I want to remind you guys about is in the next slide, which is our specific coronavirus landing page for reporters and communicators and investigators, which has everything from tools and guides, how the platforms are responding to the pandemic, a list of our webinars, readings from around the world. You can subscribe to our newsletter there as well. And it's meant to be this kind of one-stop shop for stuff that we're doing, but also that other really good people are doing around the world to try and give you guys as many tools in one place as possible. And if you'll allow me one last plug, I think in the next slide, just to remind you that we've got these 2 free online courses. You can also watch any of these on your phone. They're meant to be mobile friendly as well. So covid.firstdraftnews.org will take you to the landing page where you can make a free login and see our course either for journalists or the one aimed at the public. So we've all got that one friend who's sharing shady stuff on WhatsApp. Send them a link so they can go through our course, and maybe it'll help you guys start more constructive conversations now that we're all trying to navigate the pandemic together. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Maddy, for an incredible webinar. I don't know about you guys, but I learned a lot. We'll be sending out a recap email with links and some kind of resources for you to keep exploring. subscribe to our newsletter so you know what's coming up, and we'll send you some answers to your questions as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.